as a U.S. Senator, joining my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to affirm the importance of the transatlantic partnership. 3 times as Vice President of the United States, including delivering the first international foreign policy address of the Obama-Biden administration in the first months we were in office. And 2 years ago, as you pointed out, when I last spoke in Munich, I was a private citizen. I was a professor, not an elected official. But I said at that time, we will be back. And I'm a man of my word. America is back. I speak today as President of the United States at the very start of my administration, and I'm sending a clear message to the world. America is back. The transatlantic alliance is back. And we are not looking backward. We are looking forward together. It comes down to this. The transatlantic alliance is a strong foundation, the strong foundation on which our collective security and our shared prosperity are built. The partnership between Europe and the United States, in my view, is and must remain the cornerstone of all that we hope to accomplish in the 21st century, just as we did in the 20th century. The challenges we face today are different. We're at an inflection point. When I spoke to you as a senator and even as vice president, the global dynamics have shifted. New crises demand our attention. We cannot focus only on the competition among countries that threaten to divide the world, or only on global challenges that threaten to sink us all together if we fail to cooperate. We must do both, working in lockstep with our allies and partners. So let me erase any lingering doubt. The United States will work closely with our European Union partners and the capitals across the continent, from Rome to Riga, to meet the range of shared challenges we face. We continue to support the goal of a Europe whole and free and at peace. The United States is fully committed to our NATO alliance, and I welcome Europe's growing investment in the military capabilities that enable our shared defense. You know, to me and to the United States and to us, we'll keep faith with Article 5. It's a guarantee. An attack on one is an attack on all. That is our unshakable vow. And the only time Article 5 has been invoked was after the United States was attacked on 9/11. You, our allies, joined us to fight al-Qaeda, and the United States committed to consulting closely with our NATO allies and partners on the way forward in Afghanistan. My administration strongly supports the diplomatic process that's underway and to bring an end to this war that is closing out 20 years. We remain committed to ensuring that Afghanistan never again provides a base for terrorist attacks against the United States and our partners in our interest. Our European partners have also stood with us to counter ISIS. Just this week, NATO defense ministers endorsed significant expanded training and advisory mission in Iraq, which will be vital to the ongoing fight against ISIS. We cannot allow ISIS to reopen and regroup and threaten people in the Middle East and Europe and the United States and elsewhere. And while the United States is undergoing a thorough review of our own force posture around the world, I've ordered the halting and withdrawal of American troops from Germany. I'm also lifting the cap imposed by the previous administration on the number of U.S. forces able to be based in Germany. I know the past few years have strained and tested our transatlantic relationship, but the United States is determined to re-engage with Europe, to consult with you, to earn back our position of trusted leadership. Earlier today, as was referenced, I participated in the first meeting of the G7 leaders, where I spoke about the dire need to coordinate multilateral action to address COVID-19, the global economic crisis, and the accelerating climate crisis, and so much else. Achieving these goals is going to depend on a core strategic proposition, and that is the United States must renew America's enduring advantages so that we can meet today's challenges from a position of strength. That means building back better our economic foundations, reclaiming our place in international institutions, lifting up our values at home, and speaking out to defend them around the world. Modernizing our military capabilities while leading with diplomacy. Revitalizing America's network of alliances and partnerships that have made the world safer for all people. You know, I hope our fellow democracies are going to join us in this vital work. Our partnerships have endured and grown through the years because they are rooted in the richness of our shared democratic values. They're not transactional. They're not extractive. They're built on a vision of a future where every voice matters, where the rights of all are protected and the rule of law is upheld. None of this has fully succeeded in this, none of us is fully succeeding in this division. We continue to work toward it. And in so many places, including in Europe and the United States, democratic progress is under assault. I've known many of you for a long, long time, and you know that I speak my mind. So let me be very straightforward with you all. We are in the midst of a fundamental debate about the future and direction of our world. We're at an inflection point. Between those who argue that given all the challenges we face, from the fourth industrial revolution to a global pandemic, that autocracy is the best way forward, they argue. And those who understand that democracy is essential to meeting these challenges. Historians are going to examine and write about this moment as an inflection point, as I said. And I believe that every ounce of my being that democracy will and must prevail. We must demonstrate that democracy can still deliver for our people in this changed world. That, in my view, is our galvanizing mission. Democracy doesn't happen by accident. We have to defend it, fight for it, strengthen it, renew it. We have to prove that our model isn't a relic of history. It's the single best way to revitalize the promise of our future. And if we work together with our democratic partners with strength and confidence, I know we'll meet every challenge and outpace every challenger. You know, we must prepare together for a long-term strategic competition with China. How the United States, Europe, and Asia work together to secure the peace and defend our shared values and advance our prosperity across the Pacific will be among the most consequential efforts we undertake. Competition with China is going to be stiff. That's what I expect, and that's what I welcome, because I believe in the global system Europe and the United States together with our allies in the Indo-Pacific worked so hard to build over the last 70 years. We can own the race for the future. But to do so, we have to be clear-eyed about the historic investments and partnerships that this will require. We have to protect for space, for innovation, for intellectual property, and the creative genius that thrives with the free exchange of ideas in open and democratic societies. We have to ensure that the benefits of growth are shared broadly and equitably, not just by a few. We have to push back against the Chinese government's economic abuses and coercion that undercut the foundations of the international economic system. Everyone must play by the same rules. U.S. and European companies are required to publicly disclose corporate governance structures and abide by rules to deter corruption and monopolistic practices. Chinese companies should be held to the same standard. We must shape the rules that will govern the advance of technology and the norms of behavior in cyberspace, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, so that they are used to lift people up, not used to pin them down. We must stand up for the democratic values and make it possible for us to accomplish any of this, pushing back against those who would monopolize and normalize repression. This is also how we're going to be able to meet the threat from Russia. The Kremlin attacks our democracies and weaponizes corruption to try to undermine our system of governance. Russian leaders want people to think that our system is more corrupt or as corrupt as theirs. But the world knows that isn't true, including Russia's own citizens. Putin seeks to weaken the European project and our NATO alliance. He wants to undermine the transatlantic unity and our resolve, because it's so much easier for the Kremlin to bully and threaten individual states than it is to negotiate with a strong and closely united transatlantic community. That's why standing up for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine remains a vital concern for Europe and the United States. That's why addressing Russian recklessness, and hacking into computer networks in the United States and across Europe and the world has become critical to protecting our collective security. The challenges with Russia may be different than the ones with China, but they're just as real. It is not about pitting East against West. It's not about we want conflict. We want a future where all nations are able to freely determine their own path without a threat of violence or coercion. We cannot and must not return to the reflective opposition and rigid blocks of the Cold War. Competition must not lock out cooperation on issues that affect us all. For example, we must cooperate if we're going to defeat COVID-19 everywhere. My first presidential national security memorandum focused on surging health and humanitarian responses to defeat COVID-19 and to better prevent and prepare for the next pandemic. Today, I'm announcing that the United States is making a $2 billion pledge to COVAX with the promise of an additional $2 billion to urge others to step up as well. Yet even as we fight to get out of the teeth of this pandemic, the resurgence of Ebola in Africa is a stark reminder that we must simultaneously work to finally finance health security, strengthen global health systems, and create early warning systems to prevent, detect, and respond to future biological threats, because they will keep coming. We have to work together to strengthen and reform the World Health Organization. We need a UN system focused on biological threats that can move quickly to trigger action.
Lou, I'm kind of between two minds here, because when you think about what he was saying, it's pretty daunting. But at the same time, it was so nice to hear somebody speak the way he's speaking, and as forward and as inclusive as Joe Biden's talking. It's sort of a catch-22 for me, you know. It's like I'm thrilled to death to hear somebody actually speaking in a way that I expect a leader of a country to speak, but at the same time, that's sort of a morbid speech he was having there. So I'm a little, I'm kind of between two minds there.
Well, I guess it's kind of refreshing to hear somebody tell it like it is.
Yeah, it is.
He's here for all Americans. He said that when he was, how many times did he get harassed on the trail and shut the people down? Says, you know what, if you don't vote for me, I'm still going to do right by you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to help you. And what'd somebody say to that?
Well, I mean, that seemed to be a very good, a very strong and smart political ploy. He seems to be he seems to at least, you know, today's a month, right, that he's been in office. Sounds to me like he has every intention of actually going through with what he's saying.
Oh, I believe he will. one way
Certainly
or
sounds,
the other.
certainly sounds like it.
I mean, I think, you know what? I think he's can say what you will about him all those years in the Senate, but I think now you have the right person at the right time, having been through 8 years of stuff with Obama and having his back, watching Trump for 4, and now he's in there like, you know what? I'm getting old. We got to get this country back on track.
You and I for the longest time, both on Instagram and Twitter, and even whenever we shared an office, we always have that recurring thing of running out of fucks, right?
Yeah. I shot one at you the other day.
Right. It's always. I mean, we're constantly sending memes back and forth. We're constantly, we've done it for years. I think he really is somebody who ran out of fucks. And he's not going to play the game anymore. This is what we got, or at least that's the front that he's going to put up, right? Or that's it. This is how it is. I don't care if you like it or not. I'm going to give you the truth. It's refresh because apparently he doesn't have any more political ambitions. I mean, he's been in national spotlight forever. I mean, and he went from a senator to a vice president to now a president. I mean, there's nowhere else to go. And especially at his age, he's not going to go any further. So what the hell's he care?
If he lays the truth out there every time, what's the noise machine on the right going to say? They can't say he's lying because it's going to happen.
Right?
I
mean, yeah. I mean, they can criticize his policies or as they've been doing lately, just totally making shit up. But does he care? Does he at this point? I mean, I remember. I want to say it was probably 18 months into Obama's presidency where he just gave up on Fox Entertainment altogether. He just didn't give a shit what they said or what they did or how they presented anything. Right? I don't think he's even waiting the 18 months. I think he didn't give a shit. To go back to our theme. Ran out of fucks to give before he was even inaugurated. They just didn't matter to him.
No, I mean, you can't play games when the country's what it is. I mean, you talk about COVID, you have variants coming. Did you see the jobs report yesterday?
Did not. No.
They predicted, I was going to say 765 new unemployment. It was about 863.
Ooh.
So it was over 100 over the prediction, which is telling you, and most of that's in the lower paying jobs.
Sure.
But when's that going to start catching up to overall demand and higher paying jobs? Unless he does something now. And I think that's the whole thing with that stimulus package. Even Janet Yellen said, we're not cutting it. This may not even be enough. They watched what happened last time.
I don't disagree. I don't think, just based on reporting that I've seen, based on the people affected, the numbers of people that are going to be involved in this, and I basically just projected my bills onto all of these people right individually. I don't think that the numbers are. I don't think that the amount of money that they're looking at or that they passed, right? Because they did pass it, if I'm not mistaken, right? Wasn't Harris the deciding vote?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it has been passed. I don't think it's enough. I do question, and to me it's still a little bit muddy. Who's getting the money? Did they actually tell us what the cutoff number is as far as income?
I think the House is on that, and I think the fight in the House is going to be, I don't think, if there's a cutoff number, it's going to be high.
You think?
Yeah, I think they're looking at 300K.
Oh, really? They're going that high?
Yeah, that a lot of the people in the House said, Well, how about if you made this amount of money in 2019 and you got laid off in 2020? How do we know what's right? You know, and there's a lot of people in that range it would apply to.
I don't know, Lou. You're making 300 grand a year. I don't think you're getting laid off anytime soon.
No, and I think that's the point. Just jack it to 300 and it's going to cover everybody else.
Then you're going to need even more money for the next round, right?
Yeah, and I think a bunch of that money is specifically for states and local government. A bunch of that money's for small business. I don't know how they're determining what's small, because there's corporations that play with that number also. If you read a lot of the BS, you know what? And it is a joke, because if you equate it, basically 600 people last year got 1.7 trillion in tax cuts, billionaires. And this is 1.9 trillion for how many millions of Americans?
Right, right.
And the Republicans don't want to vote yes.
And they don't want anything to do
Tells
with
you
it.
where the priorities are.
Right. Well, we know where their priorities are. Right? How many times have you hear me say sarcastically, you should be thankful that you have a job?
Yeah, and I think more people on the Democrats' side need to have no fucks to give like Biden, especially Chuck Schumer.
I'm not exactly I'm not exactly comfortable with Schumer's ability to lead in the Senate. Maybe less or no money to other countries until our people are solid. James Mitchell, you know what, dude? That's hard to argue with.
No, I agree.
That's really hard to argue with.
Yeah, the stuff that's going to other countries is like me throwing $1.50 on the floor compared to what the billionaires got.
It is, but at the same time, Lou, and I think he's making a good point. You know, we only argue about the money we're spending between the Atlantic and the Pacific. We don't seem to argue too much about how much money is going into the Middle East or to, Israel or to any of these places. We don't seem to have that argument.
Yeah, the money that goes to Israel pretty much covers their universal health care for every citizen every year. Citizens every year. Think about that.
And you don't hear a whole lot of arguing about that, right? It doesn't make the headlines. You don't hear Fox Entertainment bitching about how much money we're sending to them, right? But you got some family in Michigan or in Detroit who can't pay their rent. All of a sudden, they're a burden on the economy.
Society, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So he makes a good point, and I got to be honest, I agree with him. Until we get our shit under control, we shouldn't be spending money someplace else. I really don't think we should. That money should be staying here where it belongs.
That's why I said a lot of that defense budget needs torn apart.
Yep.
If we're protecting corporate assets overseas, why aren't we sending a bill for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. And the bigger question, why aren't we, right? It's not that we're not, it's why aren't we?
We're giving them tax cuts. We're not even billing it when you think about it.
Nope. We're in the middle of a pandemic, which should be any excuse you need, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing it any other time, but right now, you can honestly sit there and say, look, this money shouldn't be leaving our shores. We have businesses that are closing. We need people who can't pay rent or their mortgages. We have people who are losing their jobs simply because there's just no work. It's, because of this pandemic. It's not by their fault, right? It's not like they're a bunch of fuck ups, right? All they did was show up for work and they were told, oh, sorry, we can't afford you anymore.
That was part of the joke with that first round of PPP that was out there. I just saw, who was it? Bell Companies, I believe that's the one that made helicopters, pocketed about $300 million and still laid off how many thousand?
How many of these
to keep employed?
Yeah, Yeah, I will tell you that the company that I work for used that money and kept us all employed. Okay, they did. Or we'd all be out on our asses if they didn't use the money the way they should have. And they did. To their credit, they did. They did it the right way. They did what it was used for, or what it was intended for, I should say. No, we did take a hit. We lost 20%, which we're getting back, right? I mean, we're going back to full time in 2 weeks, right?
Okay. Yeah, but you stayed employed, and a lot of you could consider I don't know how many people total work in the plants there, but that's a small business.
Oh yeah, I don't think we have 100 people. Yeah, I don't think we do. But ownership, which is it's a family-run business, they did it right. A lot of us got behind on our bills, but it wasn't like we were out. We couldn't pay our mortgages, right? We're just okay. We're behind on our bills, and we got a little bit more debt than we should have, and things were not exactly easy for us, but we were able to do something.
Still made more than if you went on unemployment.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to, the money was used right, but there's a big difference between, a company like I work for, which is a local company in Mayberry, and Chipotle, or, any of these other big corporations that got this money that, let's face it, they didn't need. They didn't need one bit of it. And they not only did they apply and get it, they fucking abused it, because they, like you said, they still ended up laying off people. I'm assuming that this next round, these big companies don't get to do that. At least I'm hoping they don't. Right? Here's what I'm thinking, Lou. We have this, what was it, 1.9 trillion that we have in this, roughly?
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's say almost 2 trillion, right? Just, I don't know, it's the same thing, but it's just easier to say almost 2. If you're a small company that employs 20 people or 40 people, we got you covered right off the bat, right? You show us your payroll, you got less than 40 or less, we got you covered. It's not going to cost you a dime. If you're working in certain industries, healthcare, food industry, right? So even, how much did Tyson get? Not to interrupt my train of thought. How much money on that first thing did Tyson get? They got a boatload that they didn't need. It's freaking Tyson food. They don't need it.
Especially the food was what was selling. I mean, those kind of purveyors did not lose any money.
No, it didn't lay anybody off either.
They are actually paying people overtime.
Right. Because all of a sudden you got a hell of a demand. Right? What are people going to do? They can't go out and eat because we decided we're going to close all the restaurants down.
I'll tell you, some of the people that did take a hit were farmers, cheese producers, because I didn't realize this, like a majority of the milk and cheese, a lot of the milk that's used is produced for cheese to go to restaurants, and people at home don't use as much cheese as when they go out to a restaurant.
No, in a week, I'm betting that you don't go through as much cheese as a restaurant does, even a small one around here. A little mom and pop here does in a day. I'm going to make that bet right now.
Yeah, how about who's that asshole, Joel Osteen? How many millions did he get for a church?
Yeah, for a mega church.
Why did a church or a cruise line get any of that money when they do not pay taxes in this country?
Don't pay a dime. Every dollar Joel Osteen brings in, he gets to keep.
Why does
he gets to keep
the cruise lines that flag themselves into the Cayman Islands? Why should they deserve any?
You tell me, right? You tell me. How did that swing? Right? How did that swing? And I know for a fact, I can tell you for a fact that we had a couple of childcare places around here that ended up closing down because they couldn't get that money.
Right.
That's what Olstein got. Right? Either they were too slow or they didn't fill out the form correctly, or God knows what the hell it was. But they ended up closing up. Right? But that asshole got it. He got it and get to keep it. There is a religion's a cash cow. It's an absolute.
It needs tax. These people are preaching from the pulpit about it. Pay your money. Pay your entry fee.
Yep. Pay your participation fee just like we do. Pay your subscription every month, right? Pay your monthly subscription.
Yeah, Purdue got between 150 and 350. That was the agricultural secretary.
Look at that.
Trump's lawyers got a firm, received 5 and 10 million to retain 402 jobs, they claim.
Wow.
Kushner companies 1 to 2 million. American media, guess who that is? Got 2 to 5 million. That's National Enquirer.
He's a big player in the whole Trump fiasco.
Yeah, that was just a few.
Yeah, that asshole's a big player in this whole thing. And so often he just flies under the radar.
Trump and Kushner real estate properties, 25 PPP loans, but 3.65 million. That doesn't count the businesses associated with Trump and Kushner properties. They got 2.1 million.
Be real curious to see how many people they ended up laying off. You know, I'd be real curious to see how many people they ended up laying off.
Mm-hmm.
And then just pocketed the couple of million there.
I bet Master Grant got $500,000 to keep those employees on.
Well, he is tight with Hannity after all, so what do you expect?
Uh-oh. What did I walk into?
We were just talking about the crooks that got, we were talking about the stimulus, 1.9 trillion. And we were talking about the first round of the PPP loans and who got a lot of them. A bunch of Trump associates for some reason.
Yeah.
How a couple local daycares couldn't get it to stay open.
Yeah.
Purely coincidence, I'm sure. What do we say about coincidences?
He's here to watch us fuck shit up, so I guess we better do something.
What do we say about coincidences?
Take a lot of planning.
They take a lot of planning, right? Here's my thought. We were talking about almost $2 trillion that's coming down the pipe that we're going to get at some point here. I would guess pretty soon, right? They're just hammering out the bullshit now. I had started saying you're under 40 employees. Part of this this 2 trillion should be covering all your expenses, right? Because you can't do it. You can't do it on your own. If you could, you wouldn't. It's covered. If you're working in certain what do you call it? Working in certain industries, food service being one, healthcare being another. You're guaranteed X amount, and I'm just, this is just coming off the top of my head. So I'm really, the only thought I've put into this is what you're seeing right now. Basically, if you're an essential employee or own a company that is essential to keeping things going, farmers were a great example, right? The only reason we stayed open was because we're the OEM for 2 companies that supply farmers. That was it. That was the only reason. We go down, they can't crop. They can't, do anything with their crops because there's no one to supply them with equipment, right? So these places should be prioritized. And then we'll worry about these other knuckleheads after that, like Trump properties and all these other things. That's the way it should have been done, and that's the way it should be done here, I think. What do you think, Master Grant?
Well, what I think is probably isn't going to be what is done in reality, because
No,
we all
we're
know
talking.
that
We're
you've got to
talking.
have you got to have the people in power to get the money, and so without that, yeah, you're just like you're just a last one on the chain.
Yeah, we're talking simply idealistically. We're just
Sorry?
talking idealistically, not reality.
Oh, okay. Idealistically, I think that yeah, I mean, you got to put food first. You got education, healthcare. You got to put those essentials up front. Make sure that those are doing, those are surviving.
Yeah, you know the one thing I never understood out of all this money that this almost $2 trillion that we're putting forward, and the first round before that, none of it was earmarked for schools, for upgrading schools or putting any kind of PPE, anything in place for schools. Even ventilation, updating. None of it was even earmarked for that.
First round?
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's in this round or not.
I believe Biden wanted the schools in this round for ventilation, for protective equipment, for teachers, upgrades. Because they were talking. Good example is there's some Pittsburgh. Take any old city. A lot of those schools do not have the proper HVAC equipment to run ventilation for this.
No, even some of the newer ones, the ones that I used to work on, they're nowhere near prepared to handle the circulation requirements that would be needed for something of this magnitude. Just wasn't available. How come none of this money? And Frank, I'll ask you, since you just popped in, and I'm going to catch you totally off guard because I'm just going to do that. How come the things like this that you would think would be no brainers aren't even put in the equation?
I mean, my guess is it's not a real hot button issue to campaign on. They probably know, I'm sure they've done their studies and they see what they can campaign on when their time comes. And, it just must not be trending in terms of what their constituents want to see funds going to. I mean, that's the only thing I can guess, because to me, it makes total sense. You hear all these people yapping and crying about, not having kids back in school, which I understand and I get. I mean, as a parent of a young child, I'd like to have them in school too. But, it must not be something that gets traction come election time.
But yet everybody's bitching that the schools are going back virtual or they're closing down or whatever.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. You would have thought that, and I mean, you want to talk about something that's really easy to sell to the American public. We want to get your kids in school and we want to keep them safe.
Yeah.
And dare somebody to argue against that.
Yeah.
It just.
I mean, but look at the gun issue. How many kids have been shot in schools going back to Columbine, and it has not moved the needle in terms of significant gun reform. It always the gun lobby pushes back hard, and they always seem to win in terms of what pushes the needle come election time.
Yeah, and you know what? Not all of that is the NRA.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of it is.
No.
NRA is a nice chunk of it,
right?
But it's not all of it. That's and we come from an area who absolutely loves their guns, right?
Yeah,
we do. I promise you can't travel between my house and Lou's house without going past a whole lot of shotguns. Lou, how many do you think between you and me, from your front door to mine? How many do you think?
Well, how many houses?
Yeah, all of them, right?
Including mine.
That's what I'm saying. All of them, even mine, right? Yeah, I remember that episode, dude.
Yeah, no, who was on air that day? Just me and you?
You
Was
and me.
was Frank there too?
Frank, were you there, or did you come? I think Frank, I think you came on late.
Oh, okay.
Who had to go shoot the raccoon?
Oh, yeah.
The
For that.
Oh, the groundhog. I'm sorry, Master Grant. All I heard was I just saw him go, and he goes, "Son of a bitch," and he's gone. Right? He takes off.
I remember that night.
it was 22, but you heard him going off.
And I'm sitting here and I'm going, oh, because at that point, because Frank wasn't on yet, so I'm going, okay, what do I do now? Because I didn't know what the hell happened. I just heard a boom, and I'm like, oh shit, okay. Hi guys. How are you?
Hey, he was in my garden.
I know, man. I know. I know how important that is.
Nobody's touching my peppers.
I know. Got some serious shit going on here. Oh, yeah, that was one of the better ones. Something I wanted to touch. I'm glad Frank's on, because we're probably the only two that really get this. Lou, you posted in our Discord channel today. You shared a site. Young online gamers are being recruited by alt-right and white supremacist groups.
Yeah, I wanted you two to look at it because I don't do gaming, and I thought maybe you've seen something about it or could lend some insight.
Well, Frank and I are still adolescents in a lot of ways. So, they are being bombarded with racist, sexist, and homophobic memes packaged as innoxious, quote-unquote, edgy humor, which can indoctrinate children into the world of alt-right extremism and white supremacy. Over recent years, white supremacists and alt-right groups have steadily emerged from the shadows, marching with forces through the streets of Charlottesville, yada, 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 yada. As extremist groups have grown increasingly visible in the physical world, their influence over malleable young minds in the digital realm has become more particularly urgent concern for parents. A barrage of recent reports has revealed how online platforms popular with kids, YouTube, iFunny, Instagram, Reddit, and multiplayer games, among others, are used as tools for extremists looking to recruit. Apparently, these are no different than the jihadists, who were doing the same thing. For extremist groups, the goal is hardly a secret. The founder and editor of the neo-Nazi website Daily Stormer has openly declared that the site targets children as young as 11. Okay, it's a specific strategy. Frank, gamers are a different breed. You know this because we both are. Easily influenced, that's for damn sure. Right? Very easily influenced. They get hooked on something, or they find something that attracts them. They go all in.
Yeah.
Look at FIFA, right? Look at, and it's a garbage game, but even you and I are hooked on this thing.
Yeah, and then you see the games like Among Us and Fortnite and Call of Duty, and I mean, the numbers are astronomical in terms of how many kids are playing these games and adults. But it's a strategy that's tried and true. Indoctrinate the youth. That's been something that any cult has tried to do. Anybody that's trying to influence society typically looks long term and tries to influence the youth. And we've talked on this show about how the youth basically are with racism, and if they're given some reason to buy into that, some of the folks who are going to be vulnerable to that might be people who are bullied, might be people who are right now sitting at home feeling left out because of the pandemic. It's probably a right time, and we have to be very alert to it.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the gaming or gamer channels that I follow, especially here on Twitch and some other places. For the most part, believe it or not, I don't see where a whole lot of the people who are actually doing the streaming or the people who are the influencers, right, are have much to do with this stuff. Okay, but on the other hand, they're not in front of their audience's eyeballs 24/7. Okay, I mean, I'll bounce back and forth between influencers like crazy, just over one game, right? Just over FIFA, I'll go between Castro and a couple other guys. And if I'm doing something, I want to see somebody. I'm in a Discord group with a young woman who is a big Elder Scrolls Online player and an influencer there, and you bounce around a lot, and I don't think it would be very difficult to be able to start grabbing some of these guys' attention, and like you said, especially younger, okay. And as young as 11 is a real good place to start. I hate to say it because I sound creepy as shit, but it's a really good place to start. Who are easily influenced, who are looking at this big picture and they put them like up on a pedestal, and you get into things like Instagram and these other places where these kids are spending all of their time. It's very easy to influence a whole lot of people. And relatively easy and incredibly inexpensive. You don't need a budget to do this. You just got to know how to post or when to post. That's it. And I do wonder, though, how big of a problem this really is. I guess that's my question. Yeah, you're going to start grabbing kids young, and you can get them, but how many people do you think that they can actually influence? Because if I'm watching a stream or if I'm watching somebody do something, that's really the only reason I want to be there. I really don't want to hear or see anything else. And I don't think that's a mindset that a 52-year-old person has. I think that's pretty much the mindset of everybody watching that channel. You think? Can't hear you.
It depends on how they package it. You've got, whatever they might be talking about in Fortnite or Call of Duty, the meta. You know what I mean? What's the meta right now? And just for those who might not be initiated, the meta speaks to the gaming community when you have a strategy or formation or, a certain gun or whatever in a certain game. And it basically is so overpowered that you can't help but succeed in the game when you're playing the meta. So kids are chasing the meta, and somebody puts a new video up saying, "I got the new meta," or "I've got the new can't lose strategy," and they start talking about that through the video, and then they just sprinkle in a little something here or there, just a little something, and maybe that's innocuous in some of the videos, but it starts to become insidious. It starts to become more and more repetitive. So I don't know, I would suspect these people are clever. Some of them, probably approach everything like, everything's a nail, and they try to hit it with the hammer, and they're just spouting off about people they hate. But, I would suspect that some of them are a little bit more, insidious about it and strategic. So it would be a little worrisome.
Master Grant, it's the whole Rush Limbaugh thing, right? What'd you say? Watch him for a week?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, and you are sucked in, and it starts off with little things, just little things like calling it, instead of the coronavirus, calling it the China virus, right? Little things like that just seem like real small, but then they build, and it just starts to hook you in, and that's what Rush did. And yeah, we saw that clip, Master Pat, that you showed where he was going off on his tirades, really saying horrendous things. but the day to day that he did, reading the news clips, giving his comments, it was just that subtle, just consistent little digs, little pulls, little hooks, and before you know it, you're all hooked up and being dragged in, willingly. You're willingly going, and you want to hear more, and you want to be told more. Nothing makes me laugh more than the Rush Limbaugh follower saying, "Don't tell me what to do." It's like, dude, you're so far gone. I mean, it's just like, but yeah, it's very subtle, insidious. That's a good word for it.
Lou, this isn't anything that should be a shock to anybody, should it?
No, I'm not shocked at it. Of course, it's after 4 years of Trump. How can you be shocked at anything the right does? Or even, I shouldn't say 4 years. If you've paid attention the last 30 with what they've done. Just like Master Grant said, a little at a time, you don't even notice. And all of a sudden, you're just hooked right in there.
And Frank, whenever this is coming from somebody who, for whatever reason, is placed high up on a pedestal, and we saw it with the insurrection. Why should adults be the only ones that get influenced by somebody who you put in such high regard? In fact, it'd be easier for kids, I would think.
Absolutely. Their minds are much more malleable, much more able to be influenced. And it's the target audience that, it's the target audience that they want. So, they see the future right now being very bleak for their cause, because, I'm sure they see what we see, that the next generation is basically not buying into hate, not buying into the, they get angry that they're taught at school about justice, about equality. They get angry that they're taught about those things at school, so they feel like we better reach back into that generation, or else we're going to be we're going to be long forgotten to history. And whatever they guise it in, purity of a race, or whatever their guise is, whatever their belief system is, that they think for some reason it's right to believe this way. That's how they're going to preach it, and they'll sprinkle it in until it becomes more acceptable, and I don't know that today we could take a snapshot and say that it's effective, to your point about 5 minutes ago, Patsy. But I would say that the fear that I would have is, without checks and balances on the content, and this is going to be up to parents to check in what kids are listening to. Without checking in on what your kids are listening to, they could be susceptible.
Yeah. And you made a great point, and you didn't emphasize it a bit, but I'm going to with the I don't want to say tolerant. That's not a good word to use, and so forgive me. I'm not trying to, but with other people or with other races or whatever it is. I'm going to tell Master Grant and Lou a story. Whenever you and I were in high school, okay. And there was one day, and I want to say it was our junior year, where and I'm not playing sly. I'm just not going to give out names.
No.
A certain football player's sister was allegedly, and I say allegedly because I do not know the true story. Had let's say a night with who would have been, and no, don't forget, guys, this is going back 1985. Okay, so imagine the mindset back in '85. Who had a either a one-nighter or a very short relationship with a African American student, and it got to a point where, and I had in the lunchroom, it was fifth period lunch, and I was there, Frank. It was my lunch, and a literal race war broke out. I mean, tables were flying, people were getting beat the hell all over the place, double, triple teamed. It was a riot, in every sense of the word. And to say it was a little traumatic is a bit of an understatement. I mean, as kids, I don't think we put a whole lot of anything into it because we knew it was coming. We knew the people involved. We knew everything. So it wasn't like we were on the outside looking in. And the reason I bring that up is because I look at, my son's 20. Frank, your oldest is what? How old your oldest?
She's 21.
She's 21 and Dante's 12, 11, 12?
Yeah, 11.
11. Okay. Mm-hmm. You ask them, or things like that will never happen to them now. They would never experience that now.
Right.
Okay. Because of the idea of dating or doing anything with somebody of another race or another religion or whatever doesn't mean a shitting thing to any of them. At least for the most part, overall. I still think you have certain pockets. But even if it doesn't mean a shit to them overall, it's far less dramatic than it was whenever we were, juniors. So you're seeing that dynamic change. And this, what Frank was alluding to, this message of the other being the bad guy, being the one to be afraid of, the one that's going to hurt you or whatever. That message is starting to fade away pretty quick as the generations continue. If they're not going to hit these folks early, Master Grand, if you don't hit these kids early whenever they're very susceptible, I'm not so sure you get them now. Because as they get older and that other really isn't the other anymore, that's just so-and-so down the street, their message is kind of lost. You have to start poisoning their minds pretty early now.
It would be like the if they. I think that okay. So I was getting a bad echo. It's the yeah. So first of all, it's parents, right? What are the parents teaching? Now, if the parents are teaching this racist garbage, then yeah, those kids will find like-minded individuals in these perpetrators. If not, I think that our younger generations are seeing, or tolerance is a bad word, but not a great word, but I mean they're not being brought up with that systemic mentality of one versus the other, and with the history that's involved, or that someone's better than someone else. That's they don't get that. They're not having that exposure, and so yeah, it used to like as it used to be all us versus them, with race, with religion, with I mean, look at the Catholics and the Protestants. I mean, there's just big time hatred. I mean, it's just. I mean, you look back at it, it's just like, what's wrong with you people? But for them, that was everything. You hate the Catholics. The Catholics are no good, or this, that, and the other thing. And and then the Catholics returned that hatred as well. So, I mean, look at Ireland. It's basically two countries. Look at the difference between Serbia and Croatia. Oh well, one's Orthodox and the other's Roman. So I mean those are big deals, and those have just carried down through years. But what we see as we look at it, it starts to lessen and lessen. So nowadays, like in the past, you couldn't, if you were Catholic and somebody was Methodist, you couldn't marry.
Yeah.
God forbid if they were Baptist.
I can tell you that one firsthand.
And that was you just couldn't do it. Now, but it's hardly a thing.
Doesn't really matter anymore.
So I hope that that's a continuous trend, that we see this. And then even when someone comes in and says, like they're a Protestant group and it's like no good Catholics, bad Catholics, hate the Catholics, that they that's just going to bounce off and not stick, is the hope, that we've progressed enough that those type of things don't stick anymore.
Lou, the more I make that other person less of the other and more of just one of us, just the guy down the street, the harder it's going to be for this message that they're trying to push to resonate.
Oh, and that's it too. Because I was just thinking they may get a few targeted, but if that's kid that they're trying to target, that is 10, 11, 12, and if he's growing up in what a lot of these neighborhoods are now, he might be sitting right next to his person of color friend, and they're looking and saying, "What the hell's this idiot trying to do?"
Yep.
You know.
Yeah. But if I can get you early, and I can get you young,
More likely in Mayberry than a city, the
oh,
same
absolutely.
thing we always talked about.
Oh, absolutely.
Christ, I think I told the story before when he was our district magistrate for a long time. When he was in high school, one of the mothers complained to Mohawk High School at that time, which was fairly new, wanting to know why her daughter was in a play about a Catholic nun because they were doing The Sound of Music as the high school musical. And she took offense to that.
Oh, dude, I can tell you a story with, it's not very old because Nick hasn't had his 5-year reunion yet. But whenever remember we were having the school uniform thing that was all the drama.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a family out here in Mayberry who had a daughter who would walk out of the front door in whatever the uniform was that they were wearing. It was like it was khakis and like a button down or what do you call it? Just a couple of buttons on a shirt. I forgot. Polo shirt, right? She'd get into her girlfriend's car or whatever, who was picking her up, and she'd change into something quite a bit more revealing. Okay. And she would go to school and she was sent home, right? And that happened 3, 4, 5 times. And finally, one school board meeting, and I'm not going to say who the principal was at the time, but you know who it was. The parent, her parent, got in front of the school board and told them that there was no way in hell any towelhead was going to tell her daughter how to dress. How about that one? That's a quote. That's a quote. So it goes back to Frank. It goes back to this idea that if you're going to get these things, you have to do it in Mayberry, right? If you're going to start tanning people, it's going to have to be in Mayberry because it sure as fuck isn't going to be in Chicago.
Hey, clever dip lever. I think I say, yeah, this whole thing's about politics more or less. So if you want to throw it in, go ahead.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to throw it in. That's kind of what we do on this channel. But Frank, anyhow, back to my point, right? If you're going to start tanning people, it's going to have to be out here in small towns and because it's not going to be in bigger cities because everybody's has a totally different point of view.
So for the most part, I mean, I think that you have to also be mindful a little bit of the fact that sometimes in bigger cities, while exposure to other cultures is prevalent, sometimes experiences that one individual has with, a negative situation or a positive situation can, influence the way they see the world. They don't look beyond a one interaction. And then they tend to let that influence the way they see things. And it's unfortunate. And, I can understand it to some extent. I mean, I'm not going to go into a lot today, but I saw something online today that disturbed me about somebody. We can talk about it another time. Let's talk about it offline and we can see how we want to handle it. But I saw something about somebody that I respect or I had respect for. Then I saw something today that made me question it. And as I was reading through the thread about this person, there were conclusions drawn that I'm very uncomfortable with. Not about the person. I mean, they may be true, but the broader conclusions that were drawn made me very uncomfortable. It made me, start to sit back and think, and not react, but just think about things. And it just, I guess I'm not disputing your point, Patsy, about small town versus big town. I'm just saying that I think that interactions, it's like New York City. Okay, there are a lot of people in New York City that after 9/11 really were whipped into a frenzy to be hyper uh, alert and critical of people from the Middle East.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Uh, Master Grant, go back to Frank's story. I've noticed a lot of people in our circles, the circles that you and I run in, not necessarily specifically, but generally speaking, who, for lack of a better term, up until last 4 years, I never would have thought I was seeing some of the things that they were saying or posting, and now I want literally nothing to do with, simply because of how they've exposed themselves, I should say. It was very, very disturbing because I looked up to a lot of these people.
You know, in the martial arts community, it's always been a very open, tolerant community for the most part, where competitions. I mean, it really is. It's one of the nice things about martial arts in general, but you still get goofballs, and when they hold positions of power, and then they let their feelings known. Yes, it's disturbing. It's unneeded. It's and it just turns you off, right? Because for all the good that's there, and all the good that's been done, this then sets everybody back 10 years.
Oh, at least. And there was a couple of them, I'm telling you right now, absolutely floored me. I never expected what I saw from who I saw it from.
Could you send me their names? I want to see.
Well, I will show you what it was. I screenshot.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to. I was more surprised. You may not be as surprised as I was because you were around some of these people more, okay, than I was. But I was shocked. I really was. Maybe that's one of the good things that came out of these years, these 4 absolutely miserable years. And somebody in our Discord, she has told me over and over and over again that this needed to happen. The Trumpism needed to happen so we could start addressing where big problems and start to weed some of these things out, start to expose things. I'm not so sure if that was a romanticized view of things or if there's some truth to that. But I do agree that one of the more positive things that came out of this, maybe the only positive thing, is we really got to see a lot of people's true colors, both good and bad. And I think it was something that was definitely necessary. Lou, how many people shocked the hell out of you?
More than a few. That was one of the reasons I got off of Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's tired, and the whole thing is, I think kind of changing the approach now is, instead of proving why they're believing bullshit, I think you got to turn it around quick now and say, disprove it.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Disprove my truth. Put the burden on them, because anytime you said, here's the facts, well, what do you got? The Trump story. Oh, fake news, this and that.
Disprove it. I always said that the Steele dossier, right? It was motherfucked on the right and Fox Entertainment forever and ever and ever. But I always ask the same question: show me something in there that wasn't true. Show me one thing that wasn't true in that whole thing, and no one could ever do it. Frank, anybody really surprised the hell out of you? I'm not asking for names, just generally through this whole thing. Were you just floored whenever you saw or read something that they did or said?
No.
He's a far better judge of character than we are.
No, actually, I mean, there are things that I guess I got numb to things. You know what I mean? I just get after so much that we've been through, it just became almost like the circus, right? How many times if you've gone to the circus, after a while you just kind of like, okay,
It's just a clown.
yeah.
Master Grant?
Oh, I was shocked, but for different reasons. I, having lived, worked, and studied abroad in one particular country, I heard there was a lot of deep racist things and comments and thoughts that were made, about me, about us, where we are not considered, where we're considered subhuman. Blood is all polluted. We shouldn't be touched. We're unclean. And there's no differentiation. It's just that's what we are. And it was hard to listen to thoughts and mentalities like that, and to be subjected to it. Coming back here, I always realized that there were people who harbored such ill thoughts. I just didn't think of the magnitude. I was surprised at the number of them, and all those people who were down there at that rally, whether they jumped the fence or not, they were all included with that type of thinking. And so, it is just, to me, that's what shocked me, the magnitude, the number.
The number. It's funny because it was really a lot of the individuals that did it for me. Speaking of individuals, let's talk real quick while we still got some time about one Ted Cruz, shall we?
Sure.
Because
Yes.
it's really hard to make this shit up. So as you know, the same people who that's too bad. We're gonna do something about that. Anyhow, we have this situation in Texas going on right now that, if you're not aware of what's going on in Texas, where the hell you been? I don't know what else to say. It's cold. It's frightening cold. And because you have a mentality there where they're just not going to follow regulation, because who the hell are you to tell me what to do? Lots of people are dying now. And I don't know if you remember me whenever we were talking about influencers, I'd mentioned Castro on Twitch. He's a FIFA gamer, probably the biggest one in the world. And he showed on his browser, he showed about a 11-year-old kid in a trailer park in Texas that died of hypothermia because there was no heat, there was no anything, right? Guy was heartbroken over this whole thing. And we had a big spiel yesterday on the channel about how this is what happens when you don't play by the rules. And Lou and I went on this tirade about how are you not going 3 feet down whenever you're doing pipes and all this other shit. Ted Cruz decided to go to Cancun instead of I don't know, going back to Texas where you're representing. And he came back yesterday. He left the day before. He left on Wednesday, came back on Thursday, or left on Thursday, came back earlier today, one or the other. It really doesn't matter. Not for the story. And his argument was, well, he was going because you can't punish him for being a good dad, right? Because his daughters wanted to go to Cancun, because out of all the weekends in 52 weekends in the year, they just decided, hey, this is the weekend we're going to go. Totally coincidental, right? And don't forget the $2 who absolutely love this guy, right? And that's being very, very sarcastic because his kids can't stand him. Right? It's the whole, it's the Claudia Conway syndrome all over again, right? He said all he was doing was being a good dad. You can be a good dad without, going to the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun, I'm sure. But he decided to do that anyhow. And he was just taking them down, and then he was turning around and coming right back. Right? That was his argument. And, of course, Fox Entertainment sat there and said, rah, 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 what a guy. He accompanied his kids down and came back to Texas in order to do his proper thing. Until you realize, or until you read the emails and the tweets that his wife sent out to some of her colleagues, who said, "Oh, we're going to be down there till Saturday. Let me know if you want to join us or not." It's very rare, and I'll be honest, and I'm almost impressed because it's very rare to find somebody who's as big a piece of shit as this guy is, and then has the nerve to come back on Fox Entertainment and say, "Oh no, I'm coming right back. I'm representing my people. I'm going to do whatever we can to make sure they get their power back," and yada yada yada. He's going to go on down the line and play the game. I'm curious as to I'll go around the horn. I'll start with Lou. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was funny. Yeah, I'm coming right back because you know what? If it wasn't for cell phones and stuff, it'd still be down there now. You know what? It's all about power. It's not about helping constituents in the Republican Party anymore. I just threw a tweet from Ted Cruz 4 or 5 years ago that kind of fits in. It's on Discord. And you know what? He would have never come back had he not been embarrassed. He had to buy the ticket at 6 a.m. That morning after he flew back, and tell me that looked like a little backpack, like overnight bag that he took with him.
The one he was pulling behind him.
Yeah. My God, I've gone for a week to Texas without something that big.
There you go. 2016. I'll believe in climate change when Texas freezes over. You know what? These guys, honest to God, apparently they still haven't learned that once it's online, it doesn't go away.
And then, did you hear them whining today? It got out online that, geez, guess who raised $1 million for the people of Texas to get to a food bank? Is it $2 million now? AOC and Beto.
No shit.
So some right-wing pundit got on today accusing them of just raising the money to up Ted Cruz and
so that's why they did it.
That's exactly why they did it.
Yeah, you know what? They cannot accept that people go out of their way to actually help other people out of the goodness of their heart with no other motives.
No other reason to do it. Lots of GoFundMe set up for a lot of these folks and a lot of the organizations. I'm pretty sure the Red Cross down there has something set up to donate. Frank, just your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I apologize if I'm going to, stop me if I start repeating anything that Lou said. I apologize. I haven't been able to hear Lou. But just wanted to say that, there are people out there that are helpers that have done things to try to help Texas. It's not as if there wasn't a possibility of just rolling up your sleeves and trying to help your fellow people rather than planning a vacation or, even if, let's just say, I mean, we all know it's not true because of the text that came out. But let's just say it was true. Your daughter said to you, "I really want to go to Cancun, Daddy. Can't you take me to Cancun this week?" You say to your daughters, "Look, all your fellow Texans are suffering right now. We should be staying here helping them." That's the example you lead as a parent, okay? And then you look around and you see Beto O'Rourke. And am I repeating anything that Lou said about Beto?
Okay. No, keep going.
Okay. Beto O'Rourke organized phone banks to call 780,000 Texas seniors to check in on them, help them access food and shelter. AOC, I'm going to say her full name, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the representative from the Bronx, New York, raised $1 million in relief aid for Texas in one day, and she flew down to Houston. While she was doing that and Beto was doing that, Ted Cruz decided to fly to Cancun. This is a guy that, wouldn't defend his wife or his father in the face of Trump and wouldn't stand up for his constituents. I mean, what more they need to see? And I do feel bad for people that die. I do. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there is nothing that I'm going to say that can take away the pain and suffering and anguish that those families are going through and people are going through. But, what do you get when you combine people who don't believe in climate change, who think that you shouldn't have any regulation whatsoever, and think because you live in the state of Texas, somehow that makes you tougher than everybody else? Okay. I mean, look, I don't mean to make light of it because we have heat here. All right. But I can remember, and I'm sure everybody on this call can remember, waking up in the morning before remote starters and your mom handed you the keys when you were 12 years old and said, go out and start the car and scrape it off before you go to school, right? Get it all cleaned off for me. And you stood out in the cold, the freezing cold, and you scraped the car until it was clean. Okay. And you walked to school before that. You walked to school when you were a kid. If you lived in Minnesota, you walked through this shit every day, okay? You lived in Pennsylvania in the 1970s, you woke up to this and you walked through it every day, to and from school. Now, our homes had heat because it was prepared for it. But it should be a lesson to all these folks down there that there's regulations for a reason. There are regulations for a reason. And, it's a hard lesson to learn. But they need to wake up. They need to understand that just because they live in Texas doesn't make them any stronger, smarter, or tougher than anybody else. It doesn't make them have the ability to tough things out when there's no regulation to protect you. So, really hard lesson to learn. But Ted Cruz should be drawn and quartered. He should be run out of town on a rail by his constituents. I know they're at his house chanting and everything else. They shouldn't let him have a moment's peace. He lied. He lied about why he went. And he had every opportunity in the world to try to help rather than just try to run away. And that's what he did. They tried to run to a warmer climate. And people made a great point about how they said, oh, imagine that. A dad trying to find a better place for his kids so he crosses the border for it. And that's something that, of course, ironically, the Republicans rail against people coming to the United States to find a better life for their kids. So I know I've taken up a lot of time and I've gone on a rant, but, it pisses me off.
Master Grant,
there's a certain amount of elitism in Texas, and that's what bit them in the butt. And Ted Cruz is a despicable human being, despicable. And you know what? This is probably not going to hurt him politically. He will probably get reelected. Just because he's got an R next to his name means that he's righteous, that he's above all else. He's next to God and the angels. But here's the thing. Tom Selleck was offered the role of Han Solo in the original Star Wars movie. He had a contract to play Magnum PI, which was postponed for 6 months. Tom Selleck could have taken that Han Solo role and broke his contract with, Magnum PI, which was, was just nothing compared to the Star Wars thing. But he didn't. And when he was asked about it later, he said, I still have to have dinner with my parents. And what he meant was, he still has to be able to say inside, he still has to look his parents in the eye and talk to them without, he made an agreement with that Magnum PI show. And yeah, they were having some troubles, but he made an agreement. He was a man of his word. Ted Cruz is the exact polar opposite. If we had a yin yang symbol right here, Tom Selleck would be this, and Ted Cruz would be in the shit. I mean, yeah, it pisses me off. It pisses me off because, and I'm so happy that AOC and Beto, those guys did it out of the goodness of their hearts. But I'm also glad that Cruz was so ignorant and so arrogant and so elitist and so self-righteous that he decided to run down to Cancun when this happened and just got busted for it. And I really, really hope the people of Texas remember that. Because when they look back at this time of trouble, I hope they remember that.
Now think about it for a second. A representative from the Bronx, New York, couldn't be any further away from Texas in any possible way. Geographically, mentality, the outlook, totally different. Still managed to get, make the time, to put the effort in, to raise the money, because people needed it. It mattered to them, right? And the person from Texas went to Cancun.
Yeah, living off the taxpayers' money.
Off the taxpayers' money.
Mhm.
Yeah, because yeah.
Good
I'll
point.
tell you what else is. I know we're getting toward the end, but the deregulation of their whole grid there. Have you already been hearing the horror stories of what, because the power's coming back online, of people that might have had $100 electric bills normally for a month, turning on all this electric heat, now have already been charged like $800 for a week.
I was going to say it'd be $1,000.
$1,000 electric, because it's the deregulation and the private and whatever they do. Those gimmicks. We get the calls around here of what they're doing to that back end of those agreements.
Yeah, and don't forget too, you're regulated. What do you call it? What is electric considered a? Well, electric, phone, gas, those are utilities, right? When you're a regulated utility, they can't just throw you off of the utility, right? You have to come to some sort of. So if you can't pay your bill, right, the $100 a month goes to $800 a month. These guys are going to get thrown off, right? If you're a regulated utility, they can't do that to you. Anyhow, before we go, because we're going to wrap this up, there's one thing I wanted to show everybody watching. We have about 35 people watching us, so thank you very much, by the way, folks. How you can help if you chose to, okay? And we're not soliciting anything, but it would be nice if if you can spare a couple of bucks to help some folks out who absolutely desperately need it. Some of the places you can go to. I'm not going to read through this whole thing. I just want to get to the some of the obviously the Red Cross is going to be in need of blood. Good 360, Episcopal Relief and Development, Direct Relief, Operation USA, Mutual Aid Hub will give you a list of all the groups that are in Texas that are taking donations. They've been backed with celebrities such as Alyssa Milano. And local publications like Texas Monthly. Mutual Aid Houston is accepting donations through a GoFundMe page. You can find GoFundMes all over the place to help these folks. I would say that kind of pay attention to these things, because I promise you there's going to be people out there trying to scam you. So do a little bit of research before you go on a GoFundMe page and because you want to help folks out. The Austin Urban League, Austin Disaster Relief Network. There's just if you want to help, you have lots of opportunities to. So if you can, please help these folks out. I mean, we have at least 59 people dead right now, like we said earlier, including an 11-year-old little boy. It's absolutely tragic.
Terrible.
Right? Absolutely, it's criminal. You said it, Frank. It's criminal. But please, if you can, just do a little bit. All we ask is, if you're going to do a little bit of research first, because I would hate for you to give even $1 to somebody who's trying to scam people out of this. So, help out if you can. It would go a long way. $5 from, you get 30, 40, 50 people who can give $5 a piece. Get 100 people that can give $5 a piece, and then you get 1,000 people that can do that. It adds up in a big hurry. And let's face it, we can give $5, right? We can. Every little bit helps. So if you can, please help these folks out. They're going to need it. If a representative from the Bronx can do that much time, you can get online and help somebody out for a couple of bucks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you can. So with that, we're going to call it a week. Well, 3 days, but it's a week for us. We will be back on Wednesday, next Wednesday. Same bad time, same bad channel. Hopefully with some better news. I don't want to see any more people dead in Texas. They don't deserve it. I don't care who they vote for.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Besides, that 11-year-old didn't vote for anybody. Okay. Until then, everybody, please stay safe, stay warm, and goodbye, good luck, and God bless. We'll see everybody.